Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Jeff Martnick, and I'm with Kubisys on the sales side. And welcome to the ILTA product briefing with a focus on SharePoint. Today, I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about your recent technology review, and then share with you where we fit in the SharePoint arena. But I'd also like to explain who we are, what we do, and how we do what we do, and then of course how can it help you, and how are other customers in the legal vertical being helped by our solution, specifically as it pertains to SharePoint. And let me begin with the ILTA technology survey. If you had a chance to look at that, which we always look at, it's always interesting. The theme this year was secure, simplify, and save. You know, security, as you know, is a big concern, and governance is a big concern. So there's a lot of projects that come around that, and a lot of additional resources are being spent, money's being spent. However, at the same time, they're promoting that you simplify. Simplify your environment, simplify your application structures, and at the end of the day, which is typical in the legal vertical, they're looking to save. Cost reduction, or at very least cost containment. However, it is noted also in the report that profitability cannot continue to rely on simply cutting expenses. So you need to come up with new technology ways. Another interesting graph that was in that report was how does the legal view the IT department? As an expense, as an asset, contributes to revenue growth, revenue neutral, or others. The good news is, over last year, more believe it's an asset. Unfortunately, the majority still think of IT as an expense. And when you think of IT as an expense, it makes it more difficult, really, to do more things, to really bring in new technology, to really have the adequate resources available to put all the functionality that's required. The other the other graph that I think is interesting is, what are the top 3 technology issues or annoyances? Now, if you notice the top 1, 2, 3, and the top 5, 3 of the top 5 have to do with change. And the user's acceptance of change. In other words, the end users, when there are changes made, their acceptance of them. And managing the expectation of what those changes should look like and how they should perform. And also keeping up with new versions of software. Now, these are all areas where Kubisys comes into play. If you look at SharePoint specifically, it kind of contrasts, you know, everything, and it really contradicts some of the first couple of slides I showed you. SharePoint Challenges it's very complex. And there are a high frequency number of changes, but there's a high value to the business. Maybe not always appreciated, according to the survey. However, there is a high value, and this is where Kubisys can come into play. Now, who is Kubisys? Kubisys has actually been around for about 8 years. This is our only product, and we introduced it at Interop October 2010. Since then, we focused on the mid-market, and we attend a lot of C-level events. And we've been fortunate enough to come away with some of the acknowledgments and some of the awards. And I show you this because breakthrough technology, most innovative, best emerging. We go about this provisioning environments from a little different direction. Gartner selected us to their DevOps category in their cool vendor list in 2013. It was also about that time that we looked over our shoulder and we had several law firms as our customers. So in talking to them, they introduced us to the ILTA organization, and we found that this is a great vertical for us for some of the reasons I've already mentioned. One is very risk adverse, and we mitigate risk. Somewhat frugal as a vertical, we are, even though we improve your performance and your ability to do your work and to deploy safely, we also do cut costs. And because you are Windows-based as a vertical, we support Windows applications. And SharePoint is a key one for the legal vertical, and it's a great use case for our product. Okay, so what do we do? Well, you have production, which everyone knows needs to be protected, be kept up and running, be safe. However, you want to introduce new software, you want to customize, you want to have changes. There's always demands for connectivity, mobility, and everything that goes with that, more access to records. So you're going to, whether you do in-house development or work with third parties, there's a need for development sandboxes, staging and QA, test environments. The issue is that these are not in sync with production. And so companies struggle with how much time and resources to get these environments to be production-like. Our solution is actually a software solution. Today it comes in an appliance. So you simply, put the appliance into your data center behind your firewall, plug it into your network, give it an IP address, and through our UI, it allows you to look at your production and it lists your production servers, and you can select any server or set of servers from your production that you'd like to spin up inside our appliance in its own environment. And these environments can be used for staging, QA tests, development, training, anywhere where it makes logical sense that you have a replica of your production environment. And by exact replica, what I mean is, if you take that staging environment, let's pretend that's your SharePoint application. It has the application servers, it has the database, it has the web front end, it has Active Directory, it has a couple dependencies. Let's say that staging bubble represents a complete application stack. Well, that environment inside our appliance will have the same IP and MAC address as it does in production. It'll have the same data that's in production, and the networking between the servers will be the same as it is in production. For all intents and purposes, it will look, act, and feel just like production. However, in our thin capture mode, and we have two modes, we can spin these environments up in 20 minutes. And that's really like the magic trick. But when I tell you how we do it, you can say, that's clever, that's innovative. Because we use existing technology. We do have 5 patents that are approved, but they're in the automation of these existing technologies. So let me just take a second and show you the thin capture mode where we spin them up in 20 minutes and how simple the process is so you can understand it, because I think it's important that you understand kind of how we do, not just the end result. And hopefully you'll find this as interesting as I do. There's really 2 steps to the process. The first is called discovery. So one time takes 1 to 3 minutes. And what you're doing there is you're reaching out, you're selecting servers from your production that you'd like to capture either now or sometime in the future. So you're building a library of these servers. So if this is your data center, and we just, for this example, select a domain controller, an application server, and a database, and we select those, we then leverage WMI to really probe them and get the hardware information. How many CPUs, what's the RAM size, disk volumes, network interfaces, IP and MAC addresses. So we catalog that information in our appliance. Now that server is part of the library to be captured. Now let's say we're ready to capture those, let's use those same 3 servers. We would simply go into our library and select those 3 servers, push a capture button. At the moment that we push that capture button, we're leveraging the VSS Shadow Services feature in Windows, which is very stable. It's been there for a long time. It's used by a lot of backup applications. We simply take a production disk snapshot of that server, and we leave it on the host server. And that's why we can spin these up in 20 minutes, because we're not moving data. Today, for you to set up a SharePoint environment, you'll need to not only spin up servers, you're going to also need to copy over all the data. In our solution, we simply take a production disk snapshot, leave the snapshot on the host server, and we read only from that snapshot the data that's required for the test. The user experience is as if all the data is local. We then provision virtual disks, so it doesn't matter whether you have physical servers or virtual servers in your environment. We P2V or V2V on the fly. And because we have that cataloged information from leveraging WMI, we then inject the hardware information. We then automated the spin up of a virtual switch, which mimics the networking. We install the virtual hardware drivers. We boot up the machines. So everything that your operation people do today to build you an environment, we've automated that process. Let me just kind of reinforce that visual. This is a picture of one of our UI screens. If you look at the left where it says production view, if you could scroll down there, those icons represent all the servers that you discovered. They're in your library, ready to be captured. So you simply take your mouse over to the production view, select the servers you want to capture, push a capture button. At that time, you see at the top where it says thin capture bubble. It starts as a gray bubble, and then 20 minutes later, when everything you just saw in that slide rocket presentation, everything comes together, and we've provisioned the VMs inside our box, and we've networked them together. We have the snapshots. They're up and running in 20 minutes. That bubble will turn orange. That means those servers are networked together and up and running. Now, the nice thing about those bubbles is you can turn those environments on, you can turn them off. You can give security access. So if you're using UAT testing or outside consultants, you can simply spin up a bubble for them, allow them access only to that bubble, and you know they can't affect anything else in your production. I mentioned with the two modes, the thin capture is shown on the top of the screen, and the thin capture is where we take that snapshot and it stays on the host server. This was really developed for that DevOps kind of agile approach. Spin up an environment on demand as you need it, use it, and get rid of it. These environments hold their integrity about a week before they need to be tweaked. And what happened was customers came to us and said, you know, we have some long cycle UAT testing, we have some long development cycles. We'd like these environments to hold their integrity for long periods of time, weeks and even months. So we came up with a feature called Save Shadow. You could think of it as thick capture. The only difference in the two modes is in the thick capture mode, we actually take that snapshot and we bring it into our appliance. Now, of course, that takes longer than 20 minutes because we are moving data. It could take a couple hours, it could take overnight. But the nice thing about that feature is not only will the environment stay up and running for a month, but it allows you to make thin captures in 20 minutes off of that thick capture. So if you want multiple copies of the same environment, this is an easy way to do it. So our primary use cases in general on the application side, development sandboxes, QA, UAT, applications and upgrades and training. Think how nice it would be to train somebody with real production data and production infrastructure. But we also serve the infrastructure side. You know, they have their Patch Tuesday and their server level patches for things for compliance. They also have some tough configuration complex changes to deal with. Active Directory, we're engaged with several law firms right now. Primarily their initial reason for purchasing was an Active Directory upgrade because of the 2003 sunset, and they need to get it done. And a solution like ours makes it not only done quicker, but done safely. It's not a DR tool, and that last bullet is to remind you that there's no way from our bubbles you can push a button and push anything into production. You still need to go through whatever your change management cycles are. We provide you with accurate environments on demand. We don't allow you to push a button and push something out to production. But if you have a DR plan, it's a great way to test that plan. So when it comes to SharePoint, the last mile staging is what many customers use us for. It gives them the ability to reduce risk on any deployment because they're able to capture the SharePoint environment, the dependency, Active Directory. They're able to capture everything inside the bubble so they can truly test out before it gets deployed. And of course, from the development standpoint, the fact that you can have multiple sandboxes with production-like data on demand allows for a more productive environment, of course, delivering faster. Now, in the legal vertical, today we're talking about SharePoint, which, you know, the basic stack is Active Directory and SQL. Of course, you can also, as I said, bring in the other dependencies as depending on what the use case is. But your other applications, they're all Windows-based, and our solution works well in all those. So often, depending on the size of the law firm, SharePoint may be utilized and may have a need, but it may not have a need that will justify the cost of the product. However, because you're a Windows-based vertical, you all have your document management systems, you all have your accounting systems, you all have exchange issues, and in all those, our solution works quite well. I'd like to just take a minute and talk about the last mile staging. You know, you go through your development, your test cycles, and companies have kind of figured out how to do this. Some have multiple environments with different versions and all kinds of different ways they kind of go through this cycle. But eventually you come with a deployment package that needs to go in production. So what we say is, if you could spin up something that looks just like production in 20 minutes, you could test that deployment package. It's probably not the coding, it's probably something in configuration, but if there's any problems, you find out then. You don't have to wait until it deploys and have all kinds of pull-out strategies in place. And if you understand the value of the last mile staging, think how it would affect the organization if your QA and tests can work in production-like environments. And if that makes sense, how great would it be for your developers to work in production-like environments? What that allows you to do is to begin to consolidate this kind of linear process and become more agile, more DevOps, if you will. So you'll cut costs by just cutting your processes and cutting your environment. You'll be deploying quicker, but you'll be deploying safer. I have a couple of use cases just want to show you that are SharePoint related. One was one of our early large legal customers. They didn't do a lot of in-house development. They worked with a lot of third parties, and they were always struggling with having environments available to the third parties when they had either an upgrade, a patch, or a hot fix. And so they were looking at us. At the same time, they had purchased a SharePoint plugin. They had done a lot of customization on the plugin, and the vendor was testing the plugin and had deployed it into production. And unfortunately, it crashed production. So they pulled that out. They went back to the drawing board to make some changes. In the interim, that was kind of the final straw. They purchased us, and when that vendor came back to the table, you know, a couple months later, they had come back with a 30-page document of how they were going to safely deploy it this time. In the interim, they had purchased us. So what they did was they spun up this environment inside our appliance. Everything in this orange square was inside the bubble. And they had the vendor test it in the bubble. And they got about halfway down the first page, and it crashed our environment. But it only crashed our environment. So they pulled it out, made some changes, spun up a new environment, tried it again. They actually crashed 2 or 3 times. But after 3 or 4 days, they were able to safely deploy it into our environment, and they just followed the same steps and safely deployed it into production. It took them less than a week utilizing our solution, and they were coming up on the 7th month mark from the initial deployment. Just to quickly review what they captured for this use case, on the left to right, top to bottom, user workstation and a vendor workstation, because the vendor was doing the work. Their entire SharePoint, their CompuGuard, and they had a SQL server with 4 terabytes of storage and a couple domain controllers. So for this particular use case, this is what needed to be captured in order to run that test. Just a reminder, you can capture any server, any set of servers, or any environment. This is just another example, and this is an example really of what they did with Thick Capture. This was one of our customers, and this represented his core environment. They're not really a very big organization. They have a lot of data, but not a very big IT organization. But what he wanted to do was he wanted to capture his core environment, which was a developer workstation, because he wanted to do development in here, his SharePoint, his 2 ERP systems, his file server, his Exchange, and his entire Active Directory. So what he did was he thick captured this. And then he set up for weekly refreshes. So this environment was thick captured and on a weekly basis was refreshed. That then allowed the different groups in his organization to go in anytime and make thin captures off of this thick capture. So depending what they're working on, they could spin up a single server, they could spin up the SharePoint environment, they could spin up the entire environment in a thin capture in 20 minutes. This is the Kubisys appliance. It's the X20500. It's the one we're selling and supporting today. It is the largest one that we have supported in the past, and that really because of the Save Shadow feature. Everybody seems to gravitate, so today this is the only one we're offering. It is 256 gigabytes of RAM and has 16 terabytes of storage. That's about 10, 12 usable. It's a very flexible solution. We have a couple of our law customers who leveraged existing SAN that they had leftover SAN, so they leveraged the SAN with our appliance. But once again, it's 16 terabytes for 99% of our customers is more than adequate, because it becomes more of a workflow issue than it does a resource issue in our appliance. I want to just mention a couple ways to access these environments. One way is through our UI, and simply click on one of the servers you saw there in the shadow environment, and you can go into the console of that machine. Another way is you can port forward into the environments from the outside, or you can capture your workstation inside the bubble. And then from your workstation, you can RDP port forward into your workstation and work from your workstation inside the bubble. It's a very flexible solution. You can set up a VPN inside the bubble. You can send terminal servers. We make it very easy for non-IT people to access the environment. Today we offer the hardware, the 2 licensing models. Think of them as small and big. If you're a mid-sized to small firm, the 20 portable will probably be sufficient. If you're a large firm, the unlimited is probably what you're looking for. It's really just the scope of what can be captured congruently. As far as professional services, we offer training. We will do statement of work. You want to leverage your SAN, we can help you do that. We have customers that are very creative. We also offer administrative services, and that was really driven by some of our smaller legal customers. They want to look at us as an extension to their IT department. So for a small fee, they just simply let us know what environments they want to capture, what projects are coming down, and we'll do all the capturing, the initial testing, and turn over the environments for them. Once again, they just see us as an extension to their IT department. Pricing, depending on the licensing model and the complexity and number of servers and use case, the MSRP will go anywhere from about $80K to about $170K. That's a one-time cost. There are discounts available based on being a reference account, and to us, that's very important in the legal vertical because we know how you all talk to each other. So we discount that heavily. It's a one-time cost. There is 18% support and maintenance that comes across yearly. Just a slide or two on ROI. From our ROI, it's pretty easy just to plug the numbers in because, we will reduce costs. We are replacing servers, we're replacing storage, the maintenance time, the licensing, everything across the board, we're reducing costs. But we really think that cost reduction is somewhat third on the value stack because it's really that complex changes and things you can do in Active Directory and Exchange that you can't normally do. So it's that time to market value, but the highest business value at the end of the day, especially in the SharePoint world, it's if you can develop against a production-like environment, if you could QA and test against a production-like environment, and if you can spin up on demand last mile staging environments that are production-like, well, then you're mitigating the risk. And I know that's important in the legal vertical. So not only are you deploying more often, you're deploying safer. If you think there's some value here, I would like the opportunity to introduce the solution to some of the key people in your organization. We always like to get people from the operations side and the legal. We also like to include the security people. They need to understand. And, of course, the application and SharePoint side of it, they can see the value. If you think that it makes sense, I will then propose some numbers. If we're in agreement in concept, then at no cost and no obligation, we'll come in and do a proof of concept. Will we do the heavy lifting? Your resources need to be available to validate that the environment we spin up is, in fact, like your production. And if everything works well, hopefully you process our invoice. If for any reason there's a change of direction, once again, there's no cost or obligation. And I don't know if any of you are going to Vegas in August, but we'll be there. Come by and see us. You probably won't miss us. So that's my spiel. If there's any questions, I'm going to just unmute people. And if you want to mute yourself, you can. But I just unmuted, I believe, everybody. So if there's any questions, we'll be happy to take them.
So I have a question. On the port forwarding, so what you do is you connect into the box, and then the box is doing the port forwarding to the internal resources?
Correct. Correct.
So to connect to the box, is that an RDP connection to the box, or what you do is you sort of like connect to the IP address of the box, and then add I saw that you had like a colon and a port, so to RDP to a workstation, you put like the Kubisys box name, colon, and then the port number, which would redirect you to a workstation inside of it.
Yeah, there's actually several ways. Sunichi, you want to give a little clarification?
No, you have it exactly correctly, right? So, and we actually make it easy. There's a simple HTML-based page you can navigate to, and you just click on a button. It will download a .rdp file, which when you open it up, will just bring up your RDP client. It will have the IP address of the appliance, colon, the port as you mentioned, which will get you into the specified VM specific kind of server that you want to connect to.
And that pretty well mitigates or reduces the risk of any IP address or name conflicts because it doesn't talk outside of that box, correct?
That's right. Yeah, each one of these test environments is completely network isolated from each other. The only way to access them is through this quote unquote a virtual firewall that we spin up, and that's why everything is done through a port forward.
So I have one other question on if let's say we're wanting to upgrade from SharePoint 2010 to 2013, and currently all we really have is a SharePoint 2010 environment. So we would capture that into the Kubisys environment, but is there a way to like add new servers, or would we build our 2013 servers and then capture those outside as well? We want to we don't want to affect our 2010 environment.
Right. Yeah, so either way is okay. The one way to do it is to capture your 2010 environment into one of our bubbles, right? And then you can, for example, use network endpoints to connect to your net new environment, right? So if you're building out a 2013 environment outside, you can kind of do integration testing of that with the old environment, where the old environment is basically our copy, our capture, so that way you don't affect production. Or you can capture the whole thing, or you can actually build out brand new inside our appliance as well.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions? Thoughts? Well, if you'd like us to introduce to anyone else in your organization, please feel free to reach out to Kim at Kubisys.com, and she'll set up a similar meeting to this, and we'd be happy to introduce it to some of the key technical people in your organization. Hopefully some of them are aware of us. If there's not any other questions, then I want to thank you very much for attending, and I hope it was beneficial, and hopefully you learned something new and you learned something about us. And we really enjoy working with the vertical, and we look forward to continuing, and we're making great traction. And I hope to see you out in Vegas. If you're out there, stop by and say hi. And have a great weekend, everyone. Appreciate your attendance. Thank you.